Hey, Dan here, and in this video you're going to learn a few really cool guidelines from NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which will help you have a lot more effective communication and just generally can help improve your life. Now, if you don't know, NLP is considered a technology. It's sort of like a pseudo-psychology that a lot of coaches use. The two guys who invented it have interesting backgrounds, especially one of them, and it was never really fully adopted into mainstream psychology, but a lot of the content they came up with, a lot of the technologies and processes are used by mainstream psychology and have eventually been adopted by various schools of thought. And there's a lot of TED Talks that are essentially ripping off NLP, but claiming it's like a new discovery or something like that. Even though this was around, I think it started in the 70s or so, 70s, 80s, that time frame it was really big. And I was actually just restudying. So I did NLP certification training in 2011 and found it really helpful. And I was just restudying it the other day. And there's this page that are basically guidelines, and I think they're super cool. So I want to share three of them with you. And it's just different ways of thinking. So the first one, and their wording is a bit weird for people who focus on language, but I'll explain it too. So the ability to change the process by which we experience reality is more often valuable, I think they mean often more valuable, as I said, terrible wording, than changing the content of our experience of reality. So what does that mean? Well, one of the beliefs in NLP is that there is no static reality. And I don't mean this in some woo-woo like we're all in Lord of the Rings way, but that we all have our own perception of reality, right? You ask 10 people to describe the same event, you're going to get 10 different descriptions of that event. Same thing at any time we're experiencing millions of bits of input, right? We have sounds we could be hearing or not hearing. We have different colors we could be seeing or not seeing, different things. Like right now, if I were to really focus, I'm sure I could hear cars outside, maybe birds. Now my microphone is filtering those out, as is my mind. Meaning that at any point, what we experience as reality is just that. It's our experience of reality, not actually reality. So what this rule is saying is that it's usually easier to change how we perceive and interact with reality than to actually change the context of our situation, right? So if times are really tough in life, say you're going through a business failure, which is actually when I was taking NLP, right around when I was going through a business failure, well, right after I had went through one. Let's say you're going through this tough time. It's easier and more effective to change your perception of reality, to look at things differently, to adjust how you're interacting with reality. And that's going to put you in a much better headspace than it is to actually change that reality. Now, this isn't saying to curl up in a ball and be like, everything's good, I'm happy, right? No, what it's saying is to change your perception of reality, which will allow you to change your state, to feel a lot better, to feel maybe more confident, more driven, then change your reality, rather than trying to change your reality when maybe you're not in the best headspace, right? And then you're going to just feel like you're going up against a wall. And that was definitely the case for me when I was dealing with this business failure. Is I needed to get my headspace right before I could make serious changes in my life, because otherwise I wouldn't have been in the right place. Cool, right? Second rule here. So there's 7 rules, but some of them are really weird and don't make sense unless you've done the training or just aren't as interesting. So I'm just going through 3. The meaning of the communication is the response you get. Now, you might have heard me paraphrase this in other videos as saying essentially, what you say is what the other person hears. And that's a little different. It's maybe a bit of an inaccurate paraphrase, but essentially what it's saying is when you're communicating, it's your responsibility to control the other person or other people's reactions or your own reactions internally if you're communicating with yourself. So often we get in these fights with people where we say, hey, this is what I said. And they say, that's not what you said. This is what I heard. And that is, especially if you're dating in a second language, it happens sometimes. And so what that really is, though, is if you want to be an NLP practitioner or you just want to be a high-level communicator, that you take responsibility for the effects of your communication. So if you say to someone, what's the cliche thing, right? Honey, like you say, what are the things with couples looking fat, feeling fat? Like you say, oh, I like the other dress better, right? To your significant other. they might perceive that as the dress they're wearing now is ugly. You think they're ugly. You think they're fat, blah, 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 blah. You didn't say any of that. You just said, I like that other dress you were wearing better. That can lead you down a spiral in a very bad way in your relationship. But more than that, it creates this communication issue, right? But I didn't say you look fat. I just said I like the other dress better. But what NLP would have you practice is taking responsibility for how the other person perceives what you say. I bet for women watching this, which is about half my audience, you're probably thinking, it would be incredible if men could finally start doing that. Fair enough. So taking responsibility for how the other person perceives you. What does this require? Well, it requires that you understand the other person, right? Understand their worldviews, understand their sensitivities, their belief system. What if you're dealing with a coaching client on the other side of the world? You know, you're American, Christian, brought up, born and raised in the church, and you're dealing with a client who's on the other side of the world who's a practicing Muslim. If you want to be able to communicate with them well, you might have to really get into their worldview. What do they believe? What do they think? How were they raised? How have they seen the world? Until you understand that, you can't properly communicate with someone. And if you can't properly communicate, you can't properly influence. So if you're trying to negotiate, if you're trying to speak to a large group of people, if you're trying to create change in any way, you need to understand the other person's view of the world. And then you need to communicate in a way that will create the actions you want, or that will be understood in the way you really mean it. So this, I think, is really cool. Now, yes, you can argue with this, right? I was explaining this to someone the other day and they said, well, that's not fair that I have to be responsible. Of course it's not fair. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to be a world-class communicator, it's a rule to take on, to say, I'm playing at a higher level. I'm going to take responsibility and ensure that this is how I communicate. And, you know, not everyone will do that. Maybe it's not fair, but who cares if it's fair, if it's making you better at what you're doing. Third rule here, which is cool and really, a good way to think about people, is that there is a positive intention motivating every behavior. And in some context, every behavior has value. So the way I'm interpreting this is that ultimately, we're all born lovey, nice, cuddly kids who want to be loved. Little babies who just want to be loved and be happy. And at some point along the way, stuff happens, things get weird, we get bitter, we get sad, we get scared, we get hurt, and then we change how we start to behave. And if you look at life this way, that we all started with good intentions, it explains, one is it gives you a much better place to approach people, to realize there aren't good and bad people, there aren't evil people, but we've all been influenced by these different circumstances and sort of ended up however we are. And ultimately, at an unconscious level, our behaviors are often motivated by positive things. So someone could be really cold and cut off and just harsh to people. But deep down, that's motivated by something, maybe by a desire to protect themselves. They've been hurt in the past. In the past relationships, they opened up to people, whether it was friends or romantically, and they were hurt. And now they're trying to protect themselves, so they act really cold, they act really mean to other people. That's a positive behavior. I don't necessarily mean positive in like happy, but positive in that it's trying to do something good to protect themselves, right? It makes sense why we would be wired that way. Another way to look at this is that our brain, and you've heard me say this in other videos, is our brain is very rational. Even people who, for using the very layman term, we would see as like crazy, right? Who are going way off the deep end, or maybe are suffering from some kind of psychiatric disorder, some kind of mental disorder. There's a lot of arguments that if you really get to know them and treat them as a proper person, that there's a reason behind that, that it's actually quite rational. So an example of this is if you look at multiple personality disorder, where someone basically branches off and creates different identities within themselves, usually, I'm tempted to say always, but I haven't fact-checked that, so I'm going to say usually, there is a history of serious abuse. So think of this rationally, right? You're a child, something terrible is happening to you. Consistently, what do? You create an identity to hide to. So your brain, in order to basically deal with such an unbearable situation, the brain will split off and create another personality to essentially escape that situation. It's interesting, I think. And so that's a part of NLP. There's another rule in here, which is basically that the resources an individual needs to affect change are already within them. So a big part of NLP is this belief that we are whole, we are complete, and we are sane and rational, and to treat your clients that way. No one is broken, no one is missing things. We all have what we need, and our behaviors are rational. It's just sometimes they're based on bad information, or they're the wrong, like they're not necessarily the right rational choice, but they are rational. There's a reason behind every behavior. And so both with NLP and with the training I did with Tony Robbins, which is derived from NLP, he studied a lot of NLP, is you look at really getting to know someone and understand their behavior, not necessarily putting labels on someone saying, hey, you're this way because of this, that's just who you are. It's like, no, let's get to understand that person. So those are those 3 rules. I thought it was awesome, and I thought I would share them with you. So again, if you're interested, it is the ability to change our experience of reality is often easier than actually changing the reality itself, or the content of the reality. Said another way is it's easier to change how we're feeling in the moment quickly. It's very easy if you learn these different techniques to quickly change how you're feeling. And then in a better state, you can change your reality. The second is that the meaning of a communication is the response you get. In other words, it's not what you say that matters, it's how it affects the other person, what ends up happening from that communication. So taking responsibility for the outcome of your words, not getting into the technical details of, well, actually, this is what I said, so it doesn't matter what you felt, saying, this is what you felt, so that's what I said, essentially. That's what I communicated. And third is that there's a positive intention behind everyone's behavior and behind behaviors. And ultimately that, I believe, we are rational with why we do things, and there's reasons there, and the more you can discover those reasons, better, easier it is to figure out kind of what's going on there. And I'm going to do another video shortly, maybe even today, on human needs psychology, which is a really cool way to look at our behavior and the rational reasons behind why we do it. And these actually go together quite well. So I don't know which of the 2 videos I'll post yet first, but I'll make sure they're linked to each other when they do. And on that note, subscribe to the channel. Come on, join us here, and then you'll get these cool videos when they come out. Until next time, thanks for watching. Cheers.